Hi, I'm Chris Ketzley, Executive Director here at the Association of Towns. Talk of the Towns podcast is a production of the New York State Association of Towns and strives to bring the voices from across New York to talk about all things towns. If you're interested in participating as a guest, please email us at info@nytowns.org. The views and opinions expressed by podcast guests are of their own and do not necessarily reflect the views, positions, or policies of the New York State Association of Towns. Hello, welcome back to another edition of Talk of the Towns, where we talk about all things towns. Glad you're here with us again today. We have a great guest for you, but before we introduce our guests, I do want to remind you, you can find us on Apple platform, you can find us on Spotify, and certainly YouTube. So wherever you decide to watch or listen, please make sure you always hit that subscribe, share, and like buttons. Those are very important for us to get our ratings up there a little bit, make sure we're at the top of the list every time you go find your favorite podcast. So please make sure you do that for us. And as always, visit nytowns.org. Any comments, any questions, concerns, nytowns.org. You can link to the email right there and get us your comments for the podcast. We have with us here the Commissioner of the Department of Civil Services and also the President of the Civil Service Commission, Commissioner Tim Hogues. Welcome thank you for being here.
Chris, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the time.
This one's going to be an interesting one because it touches on so many things that are important to our towns, workforce development, job recruitment, and so I'm very interested to get started. But before we do, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became the commissioner.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story. So, born and raised in Buffalo, New York.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.
All right.
And Sabres.
And Sabres,
Sabres
yes.
are hot right now.
That's right.
They are both our heartbreakers. Wide, right, and no goal. We know all that stuff, right? So please don't make me rehash that history. I might start crying on your podcast. But I spent a lot of time in private sector, and it's funny. The last three positions I held, individuals came up to me and said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" Right? We're doing great work, making progress. But they said, "You belong in public service." And I had no concept of elected office or public service. And so eventually they tricked me and I ran for office. I was an Erie County legislator for a term in Erie County, New York. And I enjoyed it and hated it at the same time. It, it, it it enlightened me on a lot of things that I wasn't aware of as far as the process. And then after that, county executive polling cars from Erie County said, "Hey, come on over and work with my team." And so I did, and ended up in the Department of Senior Services, and quickly became the commissioner of that department in Erie County, New York. Had a great time, did a lot of great things for older adults. And my background from school was in human resources. And so then there became an opening for the personnel commissioner in Erie County. And I was having so much fun at senior services, I didn't even think about it. And then someone said, "Hey, maybe you should apply." And so I did. And that was right during, that was in January of 2019. And so COVID is about to hit us, and so we spent a lot of time in that, and just did a lot of great things. And so I'm driving to work one day in 2022, and I get a call, and they say, "Hey, can I speak to Tim Hogues? This is the appointments offer for Governor Kathy Hochul." And my heart dropped. Like, what did I do? And so yeah, that began that conversation. He said, "The governor's talking to your county executive and wanted to know if you'd be interested in thinking about this position." And the rest is history.
That's
So
great.
here we are. Yeah.
You're enjoying it.
I love what I do. I tell people that I have the best commissioner's job in all of New York State.
That's
hands down.
Yeah, that's great. So it's an important system. It's a big system, and to
It's
many
a complicated system.
Well, I was just say to many towns, very complicated system. And so let's start with, if you don't mind, kind of giving the overview of the difference between what the state department does and what the counties do, because it's somewhat bifurcated into those two levels of government. Right?
Yeah, so there's a mix, and there's the separation and everything. And so one of the first questions I asked when I got here was like, hey, why is this thing so darn hard, right? I use a different term, but I was like, what is going on and why do things take so long? And so I got a wonderful introduction and a history lesson on how the state operates as far as the civil service agency. And so basically, the state civil service agency is set to oversee and provide guidance to the localities and how they do their stuff. And so there's a lot of autonomy that the local civil service agencies have to do their work as long as they do it within the lines and guidelines of state civil service law. So at the local level, you usually have a local commission or personnel officer. At the county level, that the towns and cities flow up through as that commission to make title changes and that type of stuff. Um, Local civil service commissions, they have their what we call their local rules that they create and operate in. Once again, according to the guidelines of New York State civil service law. So there's a lot of autonomy that rests with the localities. And so some people at the local level, right, they reach out to me or I see them in public and they have a complaint about what's happening at the local civil service level. And so they say, Commissioner Hogue, we want you to go tell them and do this. And so that's a misunderstanding. And so I would love to have that type of power and control to use it in a good way.
For good.
For good, right? but there's a reason why, right? We want the localities to be able to do stuff because there's certain nuances that are in the towns and villages that just are just different. There's 95 different local civil service commissions and agencies. So yeah, so we're dealing with all that stuff, and so sometimes it would be great to be able to say, hey, this is what we're doing. Everybody get on board, but
Right.
we know there's constraints.
Yeah, I mean, there's advantages to kind of that centralized approach,
Mhm.
but there's also advantages to,
Right.
making sure you're meeting the local needs as
Right.
well. So it's
Yeah.
the county commission that determines when tests are called and what positions they're called for and all of that.
So the county is usually the one that has the interface with the state. And so the towns and villages and cities that are up under the county will provide them with their needs. They being the county civil service commission or personnel office, will send that exam request up to the state. And when we have enough need for it, then we will call for an examination and let them know and say, hey, we're going to have an examination on March 12th. It's going to be these different titles. And then the localities have the opportunity to opt in and say, okay, we need to fill that position. So we'll hold that examination as well. And they'll do the postings and all that type of stuff as well.
Interesting. So I'm learning something new about this system.
Well, I'm glad.
It's always good, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned you kind of were around during COVID, right? Came in during COVID years, and you saw probably a lot of challenges trying to get workers and whatnot. I think you came up with a very creative program in that time that is still in place, and hopefully, I hear getting extended. Maybe talk a little bit about New York Helps.
Yeah, so NY Help stands for hiring for hiring for emergency limited placement program. Now it's statewide, and so in in early in late 2022, early 2023, one of the commissioners for one of our direct support agencies came up to me and was like, "Hey, we need to talk." Um, Heels of the pandemic, as you know, we had the mass exodus of individuals leaving the workforce, both in the private and public sector. And he said the way that civil service system is set up right now, we can't meet our minimum staffing requirements. And so when people start to think about minimum staffing requirements, we don't always equate it to what that means, right? We'll say the numbers, but it means that they are not able to have someone taking care of a person, an individual, to be there to provide those supports and care for that individual. And so he said, hey, we have to figure out something, right? What can we do? And in the past, they've hit a roadblock, and it's been, hey, this is the civil service structure. This is how we operate. But I have a wonderful team of forward-thinking individuals and civil service experts, and we just started working with all the agencies and having a conversation. And out of that was birthed the New York Helps program, which temporarily eliminated the need for individuals to have to take a civil service examination for entry level opportunities from the public into the state. But the key thing is individuals have to meet the minimum qualifications for the position. So if it called for 5 years of experience in nursing, you just couldn't hire someone that had no experience, right? So that was part of the checks and balances. And then there was a bunch of other structural pieces and guardrails that were put in to make sure that we're protecting the integrity of the process. But it was an absolute game changer.
So you need legislation for that to be extended, or is that something that can happen through your office?
So that is something that can happen through the other hat that I wear as the president of the Civil Service Commission. And so there will be a resolution put forward to say, hey, so let me back up. To create it, it had to go through the Civil Service Commission. And at the time, it was created for a year's period, and it was for a select um, group of agencies at the state level, and then extended down to the local level. And the program was such a success that other state agencies outside of direct care said, they raised their hand and said, hey, we're having issues with recruiting as well. We don't have the staff we need to execute at a high level. And so we went back to the commission, and they approved an expansion of the New York Helps program. So now it is pretty much open across the board, except for some fire and law enforcement type titles, which through civil service, they have to follow a different route as far as that. So to date, we've made over 54,000 appointments across both state and local. I think there's around 30, 34 or so at the state. Local is creeping up about 15 plus, 17 plus. And so it's just been amazing.
I think the challenge has been a great program. Some of our members might have a challenge with it. The county needs to approve it, right? So I think they have to approve it. So a town doesn't have that kind of control if they need it.
Right.
But any advice for what a town might be able to do to try to get a position approved? If it there's no like appeals process, right? If a county says no, we're not going to do that.
So I would say yes and no, right? And so there's guidelines to which titles have the ability to be placed in to the helps program. And so not to get too into the technical part and in the weeds, but if there is an eligible list, so there was an examination that was given, it was scored, and now there was a list created. And if that list is still active, so usually lists are active anywhere from 2 to 4 years. So if that list is still active, meaning that there is more than 3 individuals on that list, you're not able to utilize the helps program because you have a body of candidates right there that you can pull from. And so getting back to your point, if a city or town says, hey, we want this, and the county isn't responding by presenting their resolution, they can reach out to me. It's not that I can make the county do it, but we can have conversations on why won't you do this? Why won't you move forward with putting this resolution so that we could help them hire? Because it's ridiculous if they don't.
We appreciate that very much. So we were talking earlier before we started the podcast, just chatting, talking about the workforce development issues facing towns. We know them. You know, they're struggling filling central roles like highway workers, code enforcement officers, clerks. It goes on and on. But what specific reforms is state considering to make civil service hiring maybe faster or allow the municipality to be more competitive with the private sector?
Yeah. And so this experience on the heels of the COVID pandemic and competing now, right? So if for those viewers that may have been around back in the day, um, people were like trying to break down the doors to get in to both state and local government, right? But then there has been a transition, a shift, especially with the workforce, just like, hey, we're out of here during the pandemic, rethinking about what they want to do. And so on the heels of the pandemic, we said we have to be competitive with the private sector and other not-for-profits out there, because our hiring process just takes too darn long. And so the helps program has taught us a lot about that. And I did it for I did it for a few reasons. One, obviously we had to solve the staffing issue that agencies are facing both at the state and local level. But I also wanted to know if individuals, the public, was still interested in careers in the public sector. And so that has been answered by an overwhelming yes. So for postings, job postings that we would only get like 5 or 10 applicant respondents to, post and during helps, you're getting hundreds and thousands of applicants applying for these jobs. Now, the governor and the legislature played a big role because they provided funding for the agency, for the Department of Civil Service, to be able to do marketing campaigns and talk about the helps program and that New York State is open and New York State is hiring. And the Department of Civil Service hadn't received funding like this in I don't know how long, right? It's so also in that they allowed civil service funding to staff up to be able to help the agencies recruit and get individuals into the doors. And so that's our helps program, which we said is a temporary program from the start. It's a great pathway for individuals to get in. And so now we're in the midst of our transformation project. And this is a huge game changer. We know that civil service dates back to long, long ago,
Teddy
like
Roosevelt, right?
hundred. And I have in my office, I have documents and articles from that era and civil service commission notes and stuff. It's amazing. Like it's like, wow, this is in 1901, right? And so it's great. And so it hasn't seen a major transformation, but we know that it's necessary to be able to attract the best and brightest and the most diverse talent. So we are going towards a model that will provide training and experience examinations on computers, on cell phones, so that we're meeting the public where they are. They're no longer like, hey, we want to come to a location and sit in this little school in this chair I can barely fit in and take this Scantron bubble chart.
The
and
number 2 pencil.
Right, the number 2 pencil and make sure you fill in the circle
Yeah.
completely. Yeah, they're like, dude, we're not doing that anymore, right? And if we want to be able to compete and provide individuals across New York State with the support and services they need, we had to transform. We had to make it more efficient and accessible for individuals across the board.
That's great news. I think that's going to
Yeah.
be helpful and open it up to, I think, more folks who are
Yeah.
interested in taking these tests. You did identify a problem that, our town members have identified as well. We've talked a little bit about earlier too, is I remember, so I was a supervisor for 15 years, town board 17 years. I remember the days where people were breaking down the doors to get a job. You had to know somebody.
You had to know somebody,
Yeah,
right?
that could
Yeah.
help you get
Yeah.
everything in place. Now, towns are begging, and I don't know what the shift was, because it's still a great career for somebody.
It is.
The health insurance you can't beat.
Yeah.
The retirement is still very attractive.
Yeah.
The wages may not be where the private sector is.
Right,
So after
right.
COVID, the wages in the private sector
Right,
kind of went
yeah,
up, and
yeah.
public
There's
sector
so
was
much that,
steady.
yeah.
But I don't know what happened. People don't even know really the opportunities anymore that are available.
Yeah. And so I will say that when we started the helps program, And when we received funding from Governor Hochul and the legislature to do the marketing, it was like, wow. Like I said, and so we're receiving thousands of applications. And I have agency heads and their staff call and say, hey, we're getting too many applications for these titles, right? How do we go through all of these titles? And so yes, we won't be ignorant to the fact that there are still difficult to fill titles throughout state and local government, right? There's some jobs that people just like, I don't desire to do that, right? You have to be a certain kind of individual that is willing to do certain jobs in there. But for the majority of the positions that are available, people are really excited about it because we have removed those barriers, right? Those extra steps that in their mind, if they've always been in private sector, they're like, I got to do what? And then I don't get an answer back for maybe a year or two, and I've forgotten about it. And so we promoted and talked about the benefits of working for the state. And we have some statistics that talk about the average age of entry into state government is around 36 years of age. And so that means that individuals have worked other places and now they're opting to give the state a try. And we promote it as many agencies, but one big employer. And so you can move from agency to agency. You can keep your health care. You can keep your PTO time, right? Your time off, right? You don't lose it because you've gone from civil service to the Department of Labor. And so that's attractive to people, and they love the work-life balance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the great competitive advantages to local government in particular is
Yeah.
work-life balance. I mean, I know a lot of folks want to go remote, and towns just
Yeah.
really can't do that
Right.
because it's public-facing in many
And
instances.
so we were forced to adjust during COVID, right? And so I think that that is the conversation that we see the most when we're at job fairs and that type of thing, right? Is there an opportunity for remote work, right? And so there is on a case by case basis, both at the state and the local level, right? But I can't have a receptionist that is greeting the public like, "Hey, I'm going to work remote today."
You can't fix a water main
Yeah,
from your house.
yeah. Now, when you figure out that technology, so maybe, like Chris, maybe they can, right?
Yeah.
Because now you have doctors
Yeah, well, that's true.
that are doing
Yeah.
surgery,
Yeah.
like in a whole different
Around the
state,
world.
right?
Yeah.
Just right. So
Yeah.
maybe
We'll get
hey,
there.
maybe that's our second or third career. Right? We'll figure out that technology.
I'm running out of time for a second or a third career.
You and me both.
But I think one of the issues and this is probably more of a conversation for maybe the Department of Labor or something, but towns, I think, are so fragmented, right? They have a hard time getting their job postings out there, or people to get a big reach.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people don't really put them in the newspapers anymore because no one reads the newspapers.
Right.
So we always thought about at the association like a central job board that every town can post into, and it goes statewide. And, you know, maybe that's something that we can talk to the Department of Labor about, or maybe it can be housed at the Department of Civil Service.
Hey, maybe you could talk to us about that, right? And so as part of our transformation process, that's exactly what we're looking at, to create efficiencies at the state level and for localities. So we're working with a new jobs portal and applicant management system vendor to look at the possibilities of being able to do that, right? And so now you have a broader audience. You're sending people to one site, right? It's a universal site.
Yes.
And you're like, wow, right? And then you can see across the state and not only certain areas. And so, yeah, we're in the early stages of that. And
well, if you need any advice or help from the local governments, let us know. We'd love to get some members involved or ourselves, and we'll certainly help promote it once you get that out there, because I think that's badly needed.
Yeah.
And it's going to be very helpful.
And so my prior life to public service was in operations management.
Oh, okay.
And so I was always taught to listen to the voice of the customer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I brought that here. And so we've been around the state having listening sessions and working sessions with the local civil service agencies and teams and bringing that cross section together. I think we've had about 15 or so to date, and talking about our plans for transformation and understanding the issues that they're having, because like I said, there's 95 different local civil service agencies, and they're all different. Right? That some are similar, but they're all different. And so we're taking that feedback into account as we move forward with this transformation, because it's important to hear from the customer.
Do some, I mean, so there's 62 counties, right? So there must be like some cities with the
some have their own, right? And so the standard is for the county to do it, but that's not applicable everywhere.
Got it. So what flexibility, we're talking about this challenge for workforce development, can be given to towns to make provisional or temporary hires while waiting for, eligible lists to be, tests to be issued?
Yeah.
Any flexibility on the local level?
So they can always do the provisional, which is tough, right? And so for the audience that is not aware of provisional, that is an individual being hired because they meet the minimum qualifications, but they haven't come in through an eligible list because the test hasn't been given. And so the pushback that we hear and the hesitancy that we hear from the public is, I don't want to come into a job. And sometimes you could be in that job for 1, 2, 3, 4 years before ever taking a civil service examination, and then not scoring high enough to be able to be what we call reachable. And then you have to you have to be
figure it
removed
out
from that. Yeah, they're like, see you later, right? And so that's why the HELPS program has been such a game changer, because we have drastically reduced the provisional rates, both at the state level and the local level, to record lows, right? Because in our language for the HELPS program, we said, hey, if you have individuals that are provisional in the titles that come into the HELPS program, those are the ones that should be addressed first. So they should go from provisional to permanent, right? Which is like, wow, okay, I have a pathway to become permanent because of this program. Now, like we said, when there's eligible lists, but that means the examination was already given. So there's a pathway for those individuals. And in our new state that we're moving for, our future state, we are talking about transforming the way that we do business as far as our postings and how we post for jobs. And so there'll be a change. So we'll post for, or the localities will post for a specific job in a specific agency at a specific location. And all those that are interested in that particular job will apply for it. They'll take their training and experience exam online. They'll fill out the application. Once that period closes, they get an instant raw score, right? Which is different from before, right? They get an instant raw score. Obviously, we have to do the veterans credits and other credits, but the process is extremely condensed. You know exactly where you're applying for because you want to be in that place. With the promotion, with the eligible list, people take an exam and then they get calls from all over different agencies. They're like, I don't know, maybe I don't know, right? But in this process, you know specifically where you're applying for because that you've done the research and that's where you want to go. And we've condensed that time. And so that's why we're excited about it, because it respects the job seeker as well as the hiring agency to create these efficiencies.
Sound like you have very innovative ideas and really moving the department into the 21st century.
Yeah, some call it innovative, some call it just like common sense.
It's important, though.
It's important, yeah.
Do you ever think in, what's coming in the next 5, 10 years or whatever it is, ever think about, I'm sure you have, but interesting to get your thoughts on it, those folks who just aren't good at test taking? Because, I'll give you an example. We've had supervisors reach out and they say that, we've hired this person provisionally. They're the best employee we ever had.
Yep.
They do the job phenomenal, but they can't pass the test.
Right.
Is there any consideration for folks that just don't take tests well?
Yeah. And so to stay in compliance with New York State civil service law, the process has to be competitive, right? And there has to be an examination. And so a training and experience examination is an examination that we've used for years and years and years, that we've used to fill some of our most critical jobs, both at the state and local level. But it's different. It's not filling out the bubbles of a test. It's really talking about the training and experience that you have, filling in some of the preferred qualification. And we have these wonderful individuals that have created these tests, that have PhDs in test creation, that make them up. And so it's a great opportunity to reduce the barriers for individuals that have test anxiety, right? Just like you said, I could do the job. I have the skill, I have the talent, I have the ability, I have the want, but when it comes to this thing, I freeze. And so yeah, we've heard that time and time again across the state. And so this is this new testing format that we're going to widely is in direct response to that.
First of all, I'm learning a lot here, which is great, and I think our members are too. But really impressed about how, again, I'll use the word innovation, what you've been able to do with this department, because these are all things that are critically important to local government, and I think what you're doing is going to make them more competitive in the private sector.
Yeah,
I think that's great.
Because the speed at which they're able to do it is a huge part of that competitiveness. And so if I'm able to hear back in a couple of weeks opposed to 2 years, then that gives them that ability to be competitive.
I experienced that with mechanics. So when my town of Glenville, which is in Schenectady County, we try to hire mechanics, and every time we try to hire a mechanic, private sector hires them in one day. We tell them you got to take the test, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to wait, provisional, and they're gone before we're even scheduling an interview. So this would be helpful.
I'll tell you what, leadership matters, right? And so the governor has allowed me and other agencies, but we're talking about civil service, so I'll take all the shine. But she said, hey, my first day on the job, cabinet meeting, she said, we have a bunch of vacancies and Commissioner Hogues is going to help us fill them. So no pressure, right? But she doubled down and backed it up, right? So she provided the resources, the funding, the staffing for us to be able to do the marketing campaigns, to do the educational tours, to do the helps program, right? To get out there and spread the word about the opportunities that are available both at the state and local level. And so that has been huge. Right? That's been huge.
So as you can imagine, the association has some ideas that we are out there
You don't say.
in our legislative agenda that we're talking to some folks on, and we feel like they're kind of lower hanging fruit stuff, nothing big. But one thing that we always wondered about, and we talked to legislators about, is if somebody has been licensed by the state of New York already, right? State of New York has stamped them and said they are qualified. Why do we make them go through tests again? And so that's one area we're looking at, like, okay, if you have a state license.
And what did your legislature say?
They say, hey, that makes sense.
That makes sense, right? Yeah, that makes sense.
But it hasn't gone anywhere yet, so I don't know.
Yeah, so we've heard that. We've heard that a couple of times. And forgive me, I can't recall. I know there is some opposition to that. I'm not sure if it made it all the way to the courts and there was a court decision on that. But absent that, we are really so this future state model that we're talking about, it really takes care of that, right? It provides a streamlined way for professionals or anyone, right, that is applying for a state or local job to utilize this online T&E method, right, to be able to apply. And a lot of those jobs are continuous recruitment, so they're always available for individuals to apply and take the examination. And so there's that instant feedback loop. And so I think part of it is like, hey, we don't want to go through this long process of this old school civil service stuff. And so through that we are addressing it this way, not specifically for them, but they benefit from that, that they don't have to do the old traditional type testing, and the time is reduced. But I would love it if we could say, hey, yes, you are accredited. Yes, you have this, and let's go. But I think it conflicts with parts of New York State civil service law that talks about having to take a competitive examination to
Yeah.
hold competitive status.
Well, we'll keep talking about it, but
Keep on talking.
and you mentioned there's opposition. That old thing we learned, Albert Einstein, I think first year science in high school was for every action there's a reaction. I've learned that applies, that for every idea there's a counter idea, there's opposition.
There's opposition.
Everything we've ever suggested,
proposed.
someone has opposed
and,
it.
you're like, wait, this is a great idea.
I know.
No one
I know.
could.
No one could oppose
And then
this.
you get someone that says, hey, have you
Oh,
thought? And you're like, oh boy.
I know. I tell you, someday I'll tell you about my newspaper print mandate that we're trying to change. You think we can get into the 21st century and not require towns to have to print everything in the newspaper, public notice?
Nope.
Oh, there's a strong lobby against getting that done.
Yeah.
So,
There's a lobby group for everything.
the other idea that we had, I just wanted to throw out there and get your thoughts on, because it is a little bit more of a push,
Okay.
but is allowing provisional employees to become permanent after completing probation if a test has not been offered within a year, because sometimes counties don't offer them.
Right.
And we've talked about, it's been 2, 3, 4 years.
Right.
We feel as though if someone's been hired under their minimum qualifications, they went through probation, so the local government has said they're doing their job well, and the test hasn't been given, we feel like it's tough for that employee. We talked about it earlier,
very difficult
to continue to hang out there for years after
yeah.
doing the job. So is there a way of maybe, I know this is legislation, but just your thoughts on it, of maybe certifying them as permanent after that period if a test doesn't come out in a year?
So
Or have the state, if the county doesn't do it, have the state do it if that's even possible.
So everything doesn't have to be legislation, Chris.
Okay.
All right. Everything does not have to be legislation.
That's the best thing I heard the entire day.
You don't have to legislate everything. And so there's a couple things going on. So one, with my president of the Civil Service Commission hat on, as we're going around, we heard back from individuals, right? And especially on the heels of the pandemic, shut down everything. There weren't tests being given, right? Everything was on hold. And you have these individuals that have gone 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years without it. And so we said, as the commission, if you meet these criteria, right? If we haven't offered an examination, and I believe it's 2 years, it may be 2 or 3. I'll have to fact check that and get you the right thing, but it's 2 or 3 years. And your civil service commission or personnel office has requested the test to be given, then we will, if you present a resolution to the commission, we will pass that to make that individual or individuals permanent. But the key is, right, they had to have called for the test. Because sometimes we see it where individuals sitting and rotting as a provisional, but there wasn't a test called, right? And so that's the key part. If there's a test called, because we want to hold, like you said, we want to hold that individual harmless. They're passing their evaluation, they've done their probation, a lot of that stuff, right? They're obviously performing, because if they weren't, the municipality or whatever could get rid of them. And so we said, hey, here's a pathway, so we don't want to punish you if the state hasn't been able to provide you a test in a timely manner. The other thing that, now talking about legislation, the other thing that Governor Hochul did a couple years back is, and I forget the exact date, but we are now counting that provisional time towards your probationary time, right, that you served if you become permanent in that same title. And so where some people have been provisional for a couple years, that couple years will count towards probationary period served, right? And so that's a game changer. So Governor Hogues sends us out. She says, "Hey, listen in here and bring us the feedback so we can make the adjustments that make sense." And so that was one of the things that she's heard and had the feedback. And so we want people to be able to get into public sector jobs, and we know that being a provisional employee for a long time doesn't work because there's that inherent risk of I don't get in after X. And so if a person's been around that long, then yes, we made that path.
So again, a lot of good news here today. I'm learning things, and I know our members are, as I said earlier, but I think we have to spread the word a little bit more with our towns. And so this podcast is step one, but I'd like to open invitation for any of our conferences we do. I'd love to have you come and speak on the system to our members, because I think so many, based on what I'm hearing from the members, so many of them are not familiar with the innovations that you're doing and that are forthcoming. So I think just as an open invitation, if you're willing.
Be careful
We'd
who
love
you
to have
invite.
you.
Be careful. I love to come and talk, and I will accept your open invitation on camera.
We have a big, and the governor actually comes and speaks at the one in New York City.
Okay.
We have the big one down in New York City. It's every February. This year, it's going to be in March, actually. It's at the March 15th, 16th, and 17th of next year.
Oh, next year. Okay.
Next year.
I was like,
yeah.
You said this year. I was like, oh.
It's Monday.
It's Monday. Can you make it? I'll be there.
No, every year we have it in February. We just had it, and the governor was just there.
Okay.
And she did a great job addressing the audience, which is towns, mostly towns. And but next year, it's in 2027. It's going to be in March.
Okay.
15th, 16th, and 17th. We're actually ending on the St. Patrick's Day parade down there in New York. So,
all right. That works. Finish that up.
Finish them, go to the parade.
Walk the parade, right?
We'll love to have you there.
Oh, definitely. I'll be there.
We've covered a lot. I think we've learned a lot here. Is there anything, Commissioner, that I didn't talk about or ask, or that you want to maybe talk about?
No, you told me I'm doing a great job.
You're doing a great job.
I appreciate that. I mean, what else do we need?
That's right.
But in this vein, I do want to say this, since we have an audience of towns across New York State, there is an initiative that the governor has, and it's called Express New York, where she's looking to get feedback to make sure that we are making New York State government user-friendly, more efficient, more respectful of individuals out there. And so if you could Google it, go to the website. I know all across the state there's a bunch of QR codes that you can scan. But this initiative, or this listening feedback opportunity, is open through April 3rd, where community members, elected officials, whoever, can submit ideas, suggestions on state government, not local government. We're talking about state government opportunities. How do we make it more efficient, more user friendly? Like if you had a bad experience and it's something that you think about, like, hey, why don't we do this? Then please, we welcome you to submit it.
Yeah, and that's a great reminder. We have been working with the governor's office on that. We've got some communications out to our members on that as well. So hopefully you're taking advantage of that opportunity, and we'll continue to remind them. So thank you for that reminder. And I also, another invitation would like to extend to your office. Any time you like to get some information out there.
Yes.
We have a magazine that go to our members, and they read it religiously every 2 months.
Okay.
We do podcasts, as you know, but we do webinars for you or anyone in your office that wants to get information out there.
That'd be great.
Whatever we can do to help, because again, I think folks, towns in particular, learning about all of this stuff is going to be helpful for them. Understanding that you are being responsive to the workforce development needs, and you are adjusting to the, I close your ears, but I always say, the civil service system is a 100-year-old answer to a 100-year-old problem. You need to modernize it.
We need to modernize
and
it, right?
We
are competing in a totally different market. And competing for the workforce. And so, we have, and I call it respect. We have to respect the workforce. And so they're saying, hey, we're not going to apply and do it if you're doing it this old way, because it doesn't make sense to us.
And it reminds me, I have election paraphernalia, and you have the Vice President Theodore Roosevelt poster right there. And one of his platforms is reform pension reform and civil service. You know, so I see that all the time.
You see it all
I'm
the time. You're like, what are we doing?
We got to move on,
We
right?
got to move on.
Commissioner, this has been great.
Thank you. I appreciate
anything else you want to mention besides the Express? Because again, that was a good reminder.
Yeah, and so I can't talk about what the governor has done for our agency, which in turn impacts all the other agencies and local government. So last two things I'll say is number one, we have staff that is across the state now. We are co-located with DOL career centers in 10 areas across the state. And so we have staff that will go out and talk about the opportunities that are available with civil service. They'll do education on civil service. We also have been able to increase our municipal services division. So we have individuals that will go and talk to localities and help them. That's part of our charge, to help them with issues that they're having as far as civil service and dealing with localities or dealing with the state agencies or getting their offices up and running or making changes to local rules or whatever. We're here to assist. And then the final thing I'll say is I had a wonderful conversation with a good friend of mine, Commissioner McDonald from New York State Department of Health. And we were talking about how HELPS has impacted his agency. And so he helped, no pun intended, he helped put it in perspective for me. And I hadn't thought about this. Once again, background in operations and always thinking numbers. But he said, hey, Commissioner Hogues, if you think about it, when you take that 34, 35,000 appointments at the state level, 17, 15,000, whatever at the local level, that's bigger than some towns and cities, right, in New York State. And he said, you take it a step further, that those are people and individuals, those are families that now have an opportunity to move towards a middle class, right? He said, Hogues, take it a step further. Those families now have the opportunity to get great health care and benefits for their family. And so they're no longer presenting to the ED, the emergency department, but they're getting primary care physicians. And so their whole quality of life changes and their outlook on life changes and where they go changes because of the work that we're doing here. And so, like I said, I love my job. I have the best commissioner's job in all the state government, hands down. And it's a pleasure to come to work.
Sounds very rewarding.
Yeah, it is.
And I told you it was going to be a interesting discussion, very entertaining, very informative, which is very important. Reminder: if you're listening on listening on Spotify or Apple or watching on YouTube, hit like, subscribe, and share. Get the word out about all things towns. Send us your comments, nytowns.org. And I want to thank the Commissioner again for being here. Looking forward to working closer with your office. We've developed a hopefully relationship here now that we have, an opportunity to talk to each other more. And again, doors always open. You want to come to our conferences. I think our members would love to hear more.
I'll be there.
Thank you. I appreciate it.